Okay, guys, welcome back to Grimerica. We're going to be chatting with Alex Tsakiris of Skeptiko a little later, but as always, how's it going, Graham?
Hey, pretty good, man. Actually, we're going to be chatting with him right now. We have Alex Tsakiris on the line.
Oh, yeah.
He's the host of pretty much the #1 podcast covering the science of human consciousness. It's called Skeptiko, Skeptiko, and it's science at the tipping point. And he'll be telling us much more about that, I'm sure. And it's just a really happy to have you on here, Alex. Welcome.
Graham, it's exciting to be on with you and Darren. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's great. We've both been big fans of your work since long before we had a website or a podcast of our own. So it's kind of, you're one of the people that it's kind of, it's almost a milestone to chat with you. So we're really looking forward to it.
Wow, now I'm going to be totally intimidated to live up to that kind of billing. So we'll just have to see how it goes.
Oh yeah, no, not at all. No, it's been inspiring because as part of my journey has been through the science phase and the like the Skeptics Guide to the Universe kind of thing, and then I ended up centering around your style and people more in the middle. And it's just been inspiring listening to you. I don't know how you do it. If anybody's interested in, you came out with a podcast just recently. I think it was the 5 things you need to know about Skeptiko.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Episode 229 was the introduction to the show.
That's great.
So it took me that long, but one thing I was just going to kind of comment on the top of what you were saying, Graham, is, I've always been a fan of audio, from way back when I used to listen to books on tape. I think before, most people did. I just liked getting the information in that format, and I was always searching around for, radio shows when the internet first hit, and I could, probe into all these topics. So I think the real driving force behind me starting Skeptiko was maybe similar to where you guys were coming from, in that I heard these shows and I was like, wow, why didn't they ask this? And is that really what he thinks? And, it was that drive to want to know more and to be more involved in that process of learning from these people that really made me want to do the thing in the first place.
Yeah, it's funny how it almost comes out as an excuse to talk to these people from our vantage point anyway.
Completely. Oh, I completely agree. And I said that, and if you listen to that episode 229, the 5 things I'm pretty upfront with that at the beginning, is that, hey, really, folks, this is about my journey through these big picture questions, who am I? Why am I here? What am I supposed to be doing? And, okay, I'm going to wrap it up in a nice iTunes, WordPress, interview style format, but it's really just a way so I can answer these questions and talk to the people I really want to talk to. So I think we're saying the same thing,
So it's probably a good time for you to summarize, what that podcast is about.
Yeah, maybe
right?
the genesis.
Well, I guess the genesis for me was it seemed obvious to me that there was this debate. You just turn on the TV and you see psychic detectives or mediums or telepathy or all these things as fact, or then you'll see other people come on and say, oh, that's just total garbage. And there seemed to be this real divide. And I thought, well, you know what? I have a hard time believing that it's all bunk. I'm seeing some people that seem credible, reliable, but I'm also curious about these skeptical people because they seem to make a good case too. And it seemed to me like this was really important stuff. This was more important than sports or even politics. This was kind of fundamental stuff about the way the world worked. And I just couldn't get enough in terms of an answer. So I wanted to find that answer. And that's really what started it out for me. And, one of the people that I found interesting from the beginning is Cambridge biologist Rupert Sheldrake. And one of the things I liked about Sheldrake is he's really smart, number one, but he's really straightforward, really matter of fact. He doesn't back down. People get into space and say all these terrible things about him. he doesn't really respond in kind. He's just really level-headed and says, no, here are the facts. Here's the way it is. Here's the data. Here's how we did it. And here are the results. And it just seemed to me that that debate kept coming down pretty clearly on the side of Sheldrick. So I wanted to see if there was another side to that story that I wasn't getting, and whether there were similar kind of issues that were out there that maybe weren't getting exposed the way they should be.
So who else would be one of your, like, if you were to point these, our listeners and other people to some of the clearest evidence or your favorite proponents of the duality of consciousness, like who else would you say then?
Well, so I started with Sheldrick was actually the first person I interviewed, which was a fantastic.
Wow.
Yeah, and what generosity on his part. I mean, he is quite the intellectual, quite the academic, impressive credentials, and for him to be generous enough to grant that interview, and we had some dialogue before that, I thought was great. And then from there I went to Dean Radin, who was at another, for people who are familiar with this field, know that Dean Radin has done some of the most careful and comprehensive work in trying to nail down this this parapsychology kind of phenomena. But I guess what I was always driving at, so I like the fact that Sheldrick and Radin were very experimentally oriented, and I got involved in trying to help Sheldrick actually do his Dogs That Know experiment. So for folks who don't know, he famously wrote this book called Dogs That Know When Their Owners Are Coming Home, titled with exactly what the experiment was. He did these experiments where he would videotape the dog, and then the owner would be 5 miles away in another car in a taxi and would start to come home, and the dog would, boom, go right to the window and perk up and be anticipating that owner's arrival. It was some kind of telepathic link was formed between some dogs and some dog owners. Mm-hmm. The evidence was overwhelming, and he had videotaped evidence. And so we went about trying to replicate that. And I actually did some halfway decent replications with some folks that I'd found. I ran ads, I tried to find people, I sent them equipment, video equipment, computers, and this and that. And so I was actually engaged early on in kind of trying to help these guys bring attention to these experiments and further these experiments.
And that was a while ago, right? How long ago was that?
That was at least 5 years ago.
Right.
At least 5 years ago. But what that led to is you see, one, how difficult it is to do those experiments and to do them well. And number two, how, I guess this is one of the big things I came away from as I got into this process, is in terms of really deciding an issue, changing minds, having people go, oh my gosh, now I see, it don't happen. No. It ain't, it's like this thing I say about Skeptiko, the first rule of Skeptiko is follow the data wherever it leads. And the second rule I found out the hard way is it's not about the data. It's about everything else, So you can show people the best, most convincing data in the world. If it contradicts, conflicts with their worldview, man, they ain't having none of it, because they don't want to change the way they've built their little. None of us want to change the way we've constructed our little reality,
The bar gets raised, and then things get ignored. I listened to, when I was listening to the Skeptics Guide to the Universe quite a few years ago, I mean, Radin and Sheldrick both got a pretty raw deal from those guys. I mean, it was pretty unreal listening to that side and then delving in a little bit more to the other side.
Oh, absolutely. I did several shows with Steve Novella. I was on his show, he's on my show, and then we did a couple of follow-up shows. Yeah. And, he's a nice guy, but he's just mired in the same bullshit that everyone on that side is. I mean, it's just, you catch him in the stuff, you call him on the stuff, and then it kind of slips through your fingers, and there's nothing there at the end of the day. So, anyone can go back and listen to those. I think it's pretty well documented where he's just not right about some stuff. You know, I mean, he's right about some stuff, but there's some stuff, the big stuff, he's just completely out to lunch. I mean, where this led me, Graham, and anyone who listens to the Skeptiko show will know, is I kind of moved off the parapsychology stuff, not because I didn't think it was really, really good evidence of consciousness being more than just this illusion created by a biological robot, like I like to say. You know, I like to say, hey, this is what we're up against. We're up against the scientific establishment, which most people don't really grok this, you know. But if you have kids like I do, and they go to school, what they teach you in school is your consciousness, the sum total of your human experience, is an illusion created by a biological robot. Now, that is the mainstream science understanding of consciousness. You can go on the street and pull anyone aside and explain to them what that means, and they go, bullshit, that's ridiculous. Of course it's not. My life isn't an illusion. I'm not a biological robot. I love my family. Oh, no, you don't. You're a biological robot. You can't love, you know. Oh, but I chose to be here. No, you didn't make any decisions. You don't have free will. It's just a totally absurd notion, but it's kind of, you know, how academics, they've kind of twisted themselves into this philosophical pretzel that they can't get themselves out of because they have this fear that if they move beyond that, what they're really afraid of is that the Pope's going to run in and the church is going to take over or something like that. And there's a lot of other space in there, but that's the way this whole thing has been, you know, broken down in our thing, is that, you know, if we allowed for there being something more to consciousness, then, gosh, we'd have to let God back in the equation. Anything but that.
One of the reasons why I stopped listening to that is not just for the ignorance of some of the evidence, but it was the ridicule factor, right? Like, just when they kept making fun of whatever, right? Somebody who's seen a UFO or had an out-of-body experience or an NDE, like, just the amount of ridicule and just making fun of these people like they're idiots. That's why one of the reasons I want to do this podcast, and that's kind of what bugs me the most. Like, I have that in common with you, where it's not about the data anymore. It's about people's worldviews and not allowing those to change.
What do you think that's about, really? And what do you think that is about? That ridicule, have to put other people down, that.
I don't know. That's kind of what fascinates me about this is why do people have to go to that level? Like, and then I worry about it. Maybe I'm doing that to the skeptics. Like, and I want to try and be aware of my own, because I can get pretty heated and annoyed. Like, I honestly don't know how you do it. Like, I admire your courage and your tenacity in this battle against them. I mean, and I don't even like to call it a battle, but really, like, I don't think I could do that.
Yeah. Darren, what's your take on that, on dealing with the skeptics?
Well, I'm more of the skeptical of the two of us, for sure.
Right.
So, but my personal worldview is live and let live pretty well. Like, I'm pretty easy to get along with. I can sit down and have a conversation with a skeptic or a quote unquote believer and be civil with either or. But I don't know, it's almost like a defense mechanism, I suppose. Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of hard to approach because on one hand, you know, to be too accepting, and this might sound weird, but to be too accepting and non-challenging of some of this skeptical silliness has almost a condescending tone to it as well. You know, if I go, oh yeah, you know, all right, I hear you. I think you're totally full of crap, but yes, I hear you, and your right to speak is just as valuable as mine. You know, if that's not really then that to me seems worse than say, hey, wait a minute, you know, that's not what I've found. Tell me if I'm wrong. Teach me something new, but I'm not going to agree just for the sake of not being confrontational, you know?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I definitely struggle with that. That's very valid. I also am going through a phase right now, though, where I don't understand why we need to prove so much. Like, why can't we just let people have their experiences? And why does everything, even all these people that stand in the middle, that aren't believers, that aren't skeptics, everything seems to need proof. Like, why is that and you, me, Darren, our society? Why do we all want to prove stuff?
Well, that's where I think what we're just saying, it gets super deep really fast. You know what I mean? When you dig into these things and you say, gee, why, what's this thing about worldview and why don't we want to change our beliefs and stuff like that? I mean, it gets really psychological and even spiritual really quickly. But I think from my own personal experience and looking at myself in the mirror, it's about control. I want a world that I feel somewhat in control of, I mean, I eat the same breakfast almost every day, I love that, but I guess probably part of the reason is it gives me a sense of control. I have my little routines, my things I do, the things I do. I'm open to a lot of information, a lot of new ideas, but there is this deep-seated need I have to try and create this control, because I think what it's really all about is I realize that I'm not really in control of any of the most important things. I mean, I really don't know if it's going to rain tomorrow. And if I have plans that are dependent on the weather, I'm at the mercy of the weather. I don't have control. And I think most of my life, I don't have control, so I try and create the illusion of control. And I think that's exactly what we're talking about with all this stuff. I think that's exactly what both the skeptics are doing, and I think that's what the fundamentalist religious people are doing as well. I mean, they're just trying to create this belief system that makes their world make sense, gives them a sense of control, gives them a sense that things are going to turn out okay. And like I say, I'm right in the soup with everybody else. I want that too.
Make the world a little less scary.
Absolutely. So
lately, you've been braving the UFO field a little bit, dipping your toes in that water. It's funny because UFOs and consciousness, ever since I've been into UFOs on and off since I was 20, but the consciousness thing more recently. But there's commonalities in those two mysteries to me. Like, they're both really big mysteries with lots of evidence, with huge implications to humanity, and they're still being ignored and ridiculed by the mainstream. So it's kind of fascinating to see you go down that path a little bit and explore the overlap between those two phenomena.
Well, it's been really interesting for me, and we were talking a little bit before we started about your interview with Grant Cameron, who I think is someone who really helped me see the connection with the consciousness angle for the UFO community, and also see the position that idea holds within the UFO community. Because as you guys probably know, because you're more plugged into it, it's not a popular position. It's not a popular idea to suggest that the UFO phenomena, the contactee, abductee phenomena is all mixed up with this extended human consciousness, be it near-death experience or out-of-body experience or hallucinogenic experience or all these other things that lie beyond this kind of biological robot thing, but that are really real, to think that those are all meshed together in some way that we can't understand at this point is not super popular among the UFO crowd,
No, the nuts and bolts guys take it almost as a slap in the face.
Yeah, why is that?
I don't know. I guess it's probably, you see it a lot more in the older, because, like most ufologists you see are, not to be stereotypical, but they're, in their 50s or they're a little bit older. And I think it's just, a lot of these guys have probably been at it for, 20 or 30 years, swearing up and down that it's nuts and bolts and their actual craft. And I don't know, it's the same sort of control thing again, right?
Because it's easier to prove, or they think it's going to be easier to prove.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Yeah, and maybe, like you're saying, Darren, you don't want to think about having to trash that big old filing cabinet of 8.5 by 11 glossy photos you have of lights in the sky, like, oh God, if I have to go throw those in the dumpster, I'll never feel the same.
Yeah, exactly.
So you being aware of the challenge that part of ufology has, did that give you any hesitation dipping into that, or was there any hesitation on your part?
No, I had the advantage really of coming at this thing organically, like I said, growing it from just this simple thing of, hey, why is it such a crazy idea that some dogs, wait at the window when their owner's coming home, and then growing that into the near-death experience and saying, gee, if these doctors in hospital are seeing people die on the table and then have them come back and tell them that they have one brown sock on and one blue sock on, and the doctor, who knows better can say that, then that was a grounding to when I walked into the UFO kind of issue. I was like, no, I understand how these controversies can get polarized and how there can be a truth there that stares people in the face and they continue to deny it. And I think I also came with this sensibility that there is this extended human consciousness that if we don't factor it into the equation, we're not even in the same ballpark, like you were mentioning a minute ago, Darren, about the nuts and bolts, hey, fine, nuts and bolts, study it all day long, but if it's not back to consciousness at some point, then we're playing the minor leagues. We're not playing the big picture questions. Who am I? Why am I here? What happens to me after I die?
Isn't it funny how people are almost more willing to accept that, a dog can sense its owner's coming home, or that, wild animals can sense when a storm is coming and get out of the area and things like that, than they are to think that maybe humans can have something like an ability of the same sort.
Totally. And that's one of the reasons because I put some money as well as some time behind those experiments with Sheldrick, because we both thought that, hey, this is a way to kind of backdoor this parapsychology thing, because people are so in love with their animals. Understandably, I love animals too, but that, just like you said, they'll let that in. They'll be, oh, wow, isn't that cool how that dog, there's that link with the owner and stuff like that, not realizing that then they are then accepting that telepathy has a realness to it. So yeah, but we just never could find that killer dog that could do it over and over again.
Did you ever do it with cats? Because I swear my cat knows when I'm coming home.
Well, Sheldrick's data says that cats do it, not as much, but like a lot. I mean, cats do it like half as much as dogs. This is from self-reports, right? So
yeah.
You write a book like that and you get all these letters. And so cats do it all the time. What kind of cat do you have?
Oh, just a little stray cat, like a black and white, not a...
I don't not really like a kind, fancy, not a fancy...
No, not a Maine Coon or anything. That's probably what I would get next time.
We have my daughter has a Russian blue. I guess we all have it, and she's a really sweet cat. But I don't think she knows when we're coming home. But she sure as heck doesn't like when she's left alone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a pug, and he doesn't know much of anything.
Right. Well, you never know, because most people don't know this because they don't have, someone who's home when they're not home and is kind of monitoring it. Because a lot of times, that's what it takes. It takes, I think in the case of Sheldrick and the dog JT, that really was his superstar dog. If I remember correctly, I don't want to get the story wrong, but I almost think that it was JT's caretaker. Her parents were over at the house, and her parents observed it, more than she did. And that's what really kind of sparked them kind of observing it more, because they saw the dog acting when, no one else, when the dog shouldn't have been doing it.
And we've even seen some science that shows that maybe even plants might have that similar ability.
Yeah, the plant thing is just crazy, isn't it? I mean, because it just totally blows
Changes
apart.
everything.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
So I do have a couple questions before I forget here. They're from Red Pill Junkie, who's a huge fan of yours also, and he's a regular contributor to the Grimerica show. So he's asking here, have you or someone else close to you ever experienced an event like the ones you often discuss in your show, like NDEs or OBEs, etc.? And if not, would you like to?
you know, I think that I think that's an advantage that I have, is that I'm not like a psychic person. I guess I've noticed a tiny bit more of it, a little bit of synchronicity here or there. I had a couple guests on who talked about dreaming and lucid dreaming, and I did have a couple of lucid dreams and still do occasionally have a lucid dream. But for the most part, no, I didn't have any of that stuff. I didn't know anyone who had any of that stuff. The first time I really had a medium reading, or reading with a psychic, was after I had been on the show for a while. I had been doing the show for a while and said, hey, I need to do this, and I need to do it in a somewhat controlled way, and I actually set that up. It's not hard to do. You hire a psychic or a medium, and you say, hey, look, here's what would be most useful to me. And I recommend people to do this. I thought it was a great experience for me, is you say, what would be most useful for me is to validate the reality of this, is for me not to say anything. So if that's okay with you, I'm not going to give you any information. I'd like you just to do a reading without me saying anything. Mm-hmm. And I found all the mediums I worked with, actually the first two mediums, the readings were horrible. They were terrible. But they said at the end, they go, I don't know what's wrong. I can't do this. I'm giving you your money back. 2 people said this. And then, so everyone thinks mediums are, out there to rip you off and stuff like that. I found just the opposite. And then the third reading, I had a really pretty amazing reading that way. And it was evidential. But in terms of the broader question, have I had those kinds of experiences, near-death experience, out-of-body experience? Well, I guess I think I told you no, and, only really minor ones. Would I like to have one? I don't know. I guess I'm open to it. I've gotten interested in this life between lives, hypnotic regression. I was actually interested in it a few years ago, tried to do it, and the guy who I hired to do it was really not good, and there was no results. But I'm kind of up for doing that again, and I'll certainly report on my results on Skeptiko.
Is that like the waiting room thing, where you're in the waiting room waiting for to jump into your next body?
Yeah, kind of. So what you do, I guess, again, I'm cautiously skeptical on it, but there's a ton of people that have experienced it. And then, of course, when you break that apart, like Darren, you said you're the kind of skeptic of the group. And the way I break those things down is I say, okay, so there's this reported phenomenon, past lives. Okay, so first, before I jump in and do a past life regression with a therapist or anything like that, I have to establish, is there some reality to this past life thing? And fortunately, in that case, we can go look at the work of Ian Stevenson, passed away now, but was at the University of Virginia, who did just some phenomenal work. Dr. Jim Tucker at University of Virginia has followed up on his work. Anyone who digs into that, I mean, it's solid stuff. I've talked to several people on the show who said, hey, I was completely a skeptic about all this stuff, and I saw the quality of Stevenson's work, the methodology, how meticulous it was, and that was really made me kind of a convert. And I think it's really strong work. That's why I break it down. I go, okay, is there a reality to past lives? Well, there seems to be a lot of evidence that suggests that there's some reality to it. So then I'm like, okay, well, with that as my grounding, let me go experience and see what that, experience leads for me. But I haven't done that very often.
Have you thought about going to the Monroe Institute? They have a couple programs like that sort of help you, leave your body through listening to the music and being in sort of a quiet, sort of sensory deprived type environment.
I'd be open to that. I haven't done it. I did a class with a guest I had on, Graham Nichols.
Oh, okay.
And he does out of body work, and I did that, and I wasn't really able to achieve much, but it was interesting. I think it's a path that worth pursuing, but that's about as far as I got.
Yeah, that was a fascinating podcast. I've been meaning to actually dig more into that. I mean, all the topics that you cover are topics that we'd like to explore deeper for sure.
I'm sure you will. I mean, you get into this stuff and you just go where you're led. But I think most of us wind up hitting these pretty big, meaty topics, and that's one of them. I mean, out of bounds stuff is just mind blowing, but it's pretty central to understanding, that we are not just this thing stuck inside this body.
I have another question from Red Pill Junkie here. He must have been listening to your latest couple episodes because I recognize the terms here, but he says, what is it that we need in order to progress beyond the stuck on stupid impasse we're currently immersed in with regards to the nature of human consciousness?
I mean, I don't know. My stuck on stupid thing was in that episode, in the introductory episode 229. I said that I personally on the show wanted to move past that, stuck on stupid. The example I used is, did Noah's Ark have nails in it? It's like, well, I don't know. I don't know. We could argue whether Noah's Ark had nails in it or whether it didn't. But I'm kind of stuck on Noah being 500 years old and getting all these animals and putting them on the boat. I mean, to me, that seems like the main point, not this other point, But when you get in the flip side of that, like I said in the show, was, the arguments that you'll get into with people about near-death experience and about, could it have been some deep part of the brain that's still working and, this and that. And it's like, well, whether there was some deep activity inside the brain that was beyond the reach of the EEG that measures the outer cortical, activity, I'm still hung up on the fact that the guy had his eyes closed and could see the gurney coming in from, 100 yards away and could hear a conversation 3 floors down and, all the rest of that. So if you can explain the out-of-body experience and the hyper-lucid telepathy that they experienced, then we have something to talk about. But otherwise, I'm not really interested in, last gasp of a dying rat's brain or any of the rest. Those are stuck on stupid debates. And there's so many, I guess the point that he's getting at, which I totally get and agree with, is there's a lot of really interesting debates to have. We touched on the UFO thing. I mean, what is going on with that connection with that other consciousness? Or if we get into the NDE area, why are these NDEs so fantastical, so out there? I mean, okay, they're happening, these people are dead and they're having these hyperlucid experiences, but why are they so weird and so different and, flying on the wing of a butterfly like Eben Alexander, and then this other person Jesus and this other person seeing something totally different? I mean, what's going on there, But you'll never get to those if you stay in the stuck on stupid kind of debates. You'll just never get to those level 2 discussions, and that's where I want to go.
Yeah, you almost have to be able to put your differences aside to get into that deeper level, right? You have to, I don't know, it's hard to find those kind of conversations nowadays.
Yeah, well, I think it is, but I got to pick on that word there. I don't think you can put your differences aside exactly. I think it's back to what we were talking about before. It's like, that has the potential of being kind of meaningless. It's like, look, if you think that your consciousness is an illusion created by you, a biological robot, then we need to have a different conversation. I don't want to bypass that and say, okay, I know you think that, but come on in and let's have this conversation over here. That just isn't going to work. If that's the conversation you want to have, if you really think that's the way that it works, or you're not convinced that that consciousness and that your mind is anything more than your brain, if that's where you're at, I'd rather have that discussion with you, and it might be more confrontational, hammer you with the same kind of arguments. But then if you're beyond that, then I think, hey, let's go over on the side and have that other conversation. But I don't really want you in that first conversation, because it just doesn't work. We've all been there on the internet and in person. You're just not going to make any progress. It's like talking to a person who's, has this kind of fundamental religious bent. I mean, we've been there. You talk for an hour, and then they spin around and they're starting to quote Bible scriptures again. You're like, well, wait a minute. I thought we were past that.
I have an idea about how things are going to open up, because I think in the past, 5-10 years, things have been opening up more. I know people in my life definitely feel more comfortable talking about all these unexplained phenomena, but I think it's almost like there's so many people now that either know somebody that they love, almost like Red Pill Junkie's question, or they've had strange experiences that the mainstream scientific community can't explain, that number just keeps growing and growing. And as people feel more comfortable and open about talking about it, it's almost like there's going to be a tipping point where our consciousness shifts, because so many people have had this. And I mean, that's why I think so many people are into conspiracies, because there's stuff going on all the time with people that they love or with them, and yet there's a denial still, this blanket of denial in our society. And I think that it's only a matter of time before that shifts.
Yeah, you might be right. I've never been too big on the shift, because I think we can have a tendency to kind of, groupthink and kind of get in our own little enclave, and, we all see ourselves going in the same way. That's one thing I do appreciate about at least keeping the door open, like I was saying, to that skeptical argument, is that it connects me with the fact that the conclusions I've come to are extremely unpopular, and I have to deal with that. I can deal with it. I'm okay with it, but I don't want to forget that, because it leads me to think that, gee, I'm in the majority. Doesn't everyone realize that NDEs are real and abductions are really happening, and some of these conspiracies are obviously true. It's like, whoa, you now with those three statements put yourself in a small, part of the population.
It's got to be like, you've been at this since I think around 2007. Which there must not have been a lot of stuff like this out there back then. Gosh, I don't know. I think there was. I mean, there's more now, but I've changed somewhat too. So moving target. It's the man in the river thing. The man crosses a river once, and when he crosses it a second time, neither him or the river are the same. I think that's everything's always changing. So 230 episodes in, I guess it's pretty fair to say that you've tipped more into the believing side of things the entire time. Has there ever been a time that made you just say, huh? Or have you had any aha moments, I suppose?
I have to say, the first big surprise was that the skeptical arguments were as weak as they were. Really early on, I kind of found that out. And the most dramatic example I remember that was, again, it was Skeptics Guide to the Universe and Steve Novella, and he had done this interview with Dr. Ray Hyman from University of Oregon, skeptic, CIA guy. The CIA hired him to kind of diss the whole Stargate remote viewing thing, and he did a good job of that. But Ray Hyman came on his show, and he just made all these really disparaging comments about Dean Radin. Oh, the guy, he's quite a character. He data, to fit his hypothesis, da. So I did this before my interview with Radin. This was like the second show. And I've told other people this, but I always remember it. I didn't know what Radin was going to say. It was one of those good moments, like a radio moment. I felt like a real journalist here, It's like, because I didn't know what the guy's going to say. And I said, okay, here's the clip. Here's what these guys are saying. What's the deal? And Dean Radin is really, really smart and really savvy. He's been through the mill enough. And he just tore Hyman apart, just piece by piece, very calmly. And he just what he had said as complete and utter bullshit. And anyone can go back, and I've summarized it a couple times in the show, but he just showed how, first thing Hyman said is, hey, he never repeats this experiment. And then he goes, even he admits that I repeated the experiment 3 times, and since then it's been repeated 29 times at 7 different labs across the world. And then he, went about tearing apart the other things about him messing with the data and meta-analysis and all that stuff. I won't go into it. But that was really a moment. And then the second moment, I mentioned this in episode 229, is this series of interviews I did with science journalist Ben Radford, skeptic, hardcore skeptic. And it was on psychic detectives. And we picked this case, this murder case. And it was really a fascinating little project we did, because we had this case that the police had agreed that the psychic had helped solve the case. I shouldn't say that. See, this is how the skeptics pick it apart. She didn't help solve the case. She provided information that no one could have possibly known, amazing information that turned out to be true, and it may have helped the police solve the case. Okay, there we go. Subtle difference, but it's different. Anyways, I get Ben Radford on, and we do this series of interviews. To his credit, he went and interviewed the psychic. He went and interviewed from the New Jersey police and the lieutenant from the New Jersey police. I interviewed these people too, independently. Then Ben and I got together at the end of the show, and Ben says, hey, I found these discrepancies. And I was like, no, I have a transcript of the interview. He didn't say that. So the discrepancy centered around, we're going to get into some real detail here, but just said we could kind of go anywhere with it. And I love this story.
Yeah, sure.
The psychic, Nancy Weber, had said all this amazing stuff. She had psychically seen the killer, said, hey, this guy is from this area. He actually lives in the Hollow. He lived in the Hollow, which was this within this area. I think it was in Pennsylvania, bordering New Jersey, whatever. And he goes, but he went down to Florida, and he was in prison for killing somebody. But oh my God, they let him out, and he came back. So, and then she went on to describe him physically. He had this widow's peak. She described his name. She got, pieces of the name, stuff like this. So here's the piece that Ben Radford focused on. He goes, hey, in my interview, they didn't say Florida. The cops said the South. No, okay, you gotta laugh, right? I mean, all this other stuff, yeah, all that other stuff is true, but I said, no, wait a minute. They said Florida. So we called up the first guy, Captain Moore. I got right in Ben's face. He goes, no, I did not say that. I told you Florida. She said Florida. She told us he went down to Florida. Okay, so he kind of gathers himself. We go and interview, and then he goes, yeah, but the other guy, what was his name? Hughes, Lieutenant Hughes. He told me the South. So we call up Lieutenant Hughes, and he goes, hey, I might have used the general term the South with you, but she said Florida. I remember Florida, okay? So he's slapped down here. He's completely defeated, right? He goes on the Skepticality podcast, and he repeats. He says, I interviewed the cops, and the cops said that they didn't agree with Nancy Weber and that Nancy, you know, all this. And he goes into the Florida South thing as an example of this. So that for me was a moment when I realized that it's not really about, you know, proving anything. Here we had spent hours and hours and hours, all these transcripts, all these, you know, interviews, and, you know, he's going to lie at the end of it anyway. And unfortunately, that happens. That happens, you know, whether it's intentional on somebody's part in that they're saying, hey, I just have to deceive and bring themselves, you know, to accepting it so they kind of make something up in their mind. I don't know, but that's not the first time that's happened. It was just the most dramatic example that kind of turned me to go, you know, it's really not about the data. It's about all this other stuff.
And again, in that specific instance, focusing on the South instead of Florida for a psychic detective. And if you really looked deep into that phenomenon, I mean, there's a lot of evidence, and there's a lot of cops that'll tell you that they use them and they're successful. And it's just another one of these areas that just gets underrated and overlooked.
Completely. And then you go on Wikipedia. You want a real kicker.
Yeah.
Anyone out there, go on Wikipedia and look for psychic detective. And Ben Radford is featured prominently in that article as well.
There you go. They've got control over Wiki too. So
doesn't everyone have control over Wiki?
No.
Really? Isn't that how it works?
It's supposed to work that way.
Oh, I've never tried to wiki anything.
Well, we'll pick something really controversial, Darren, and go in and try and change somebody's page.
Yeah, well, there's that whole Sheldrake thing, right, about his page, right?
Yeah.
I remember some dude in a wife beater down in Florida too. That was his like life mission was to change everything written about global warming or something like that, or something along those lines. And I remember they showed a picture of him, and he's like wearing a dirty wife beater, and it's just like, come on, man.
Yeah, there was some guy, I understand, when the Sheldrake thing on Wikipedia hit, and if anyone isn't familiar with it, they can Google it and they'll quickly find it. But Wikipedia admitted that there had been a couple of people that had really kind of rigged the system and created a bunch of, you know, sock puppets, and then had gone around and done just thousands, like you're saying, thousands of posts on a particular topic in order to, you know, in one case it was to defame this one guy. This guy had this feud with somebody who was just trying to destroy his reputation. So yeah, it's pretty bad.
The wonderful world of bots.
Yeah. Hey, I was shocked. Yeah. I was shocked when I started digging into this and thinking about why now, when we're in the information age, that I was thinking intuitively or like logically, you'd think we'd all be coming towards this common middle of truth. But for some reason, and you know, you've explained it many times on your show, and there's studies now that show how we take little bits of information of what we want to reinforce our worldview. But it's hard to. Who was it? Steve Volk came out with that Fringeology book, and I heard him talking quite a bit about it, and it really opened my eyes to the polarization of all these belief systems. Even though we have all this information now, people just take what they want, and then we get more and more polarized. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, what do you guys think about, you know, I hear a lot about from people who think that the internet is going to be this tremendous, you know, instrument of change along those lines. Do you think that's overhyped, or do you think we should have already seen it if it was going to happen, or you know, is that kind of what we're headed towards?
I think it's starting to happen. I think there's just a little bit too much. I don't know. There's still just a little bit too much control on it, I think, from like the corporate world. And like just these giant companies like right now the people don't control the internet as much as the corporations do, but I think it's a start. Like people getting to talk to each other from all over the world and finding groups that before they might have not been able to find anyone to talk to about certain things in their little towns or their little corner of the world. So it can help people come off an island, I suppose.
That's what I think the main thing is. It's connecting like-minded people, which who knows what the effect will end up being. It could polarize things more because people have the ability now to get in their little paradigm and stay there in a comfort zone. But I mean, that's, I think, what's going to happen over the next 5-10 years is just going to get more and more like that.
Yeah, and it's got to be a start. Like that can't be. I can't look at it in a way that it is a bad thing. I can't see. I mean, obviously the internet has its problems, but I mean the idea of everybody being able to communicate with each other and stay up to date on different things, I think is wholly positive.
Yeah, I tend to agree, and I think more is not always all better, but in general, yeah, I agree, it's better.
Yeah,
it's just we need to get more people online so that everybody has the equal, I don't know, voice, as it were.
Yeah, I think the great thing about, you mentioned the corporate thing, and it's funny to think back, 15, even 20 years ago, there were a lot of people that were predicting that the internet would be much more corporate than it is right now. And I think it's that long tail that you kind of alluded to where, there's just a million little niches out there. I think is really the strength of the internet, and I think it's going to continue to be that way. Not everybody goes, it's not a one size fits all. It's not I'll just go to Yahoo, that's all I need, or wherever.
So speaking of the internet and technology and things like that, have you what's your take on the simulation theory and on everything being information and things like that? Like, where does that kind of fit into your journey so far?
I've touched on it a couple times, and I don't think it holds very well. I'm struck by the difference between, that model of things and these extended conscious experiences, or what people call spiritually transformative experiences, with near-death experience being one, but there being many ways to achieve it. Some guy goes to the Amazon and does ayahuasca, and his life has changed forever. I don't see the parallels that I would expect to see if there was a lot to the, information, Tom Campbell, virtual reality kind of thing. I don't know. It just doesn't ring true to me. What do you guys think?
I haven't really thought about it in terms of equating it to the consciousness, like the duality of consciousness. It seems to make sense to me on a surface, looking at everything like a computer program. But then when you're right, when you take away that sort of spiritual aspect, which I freely admit I'm kind of new agey, and I'm a little bit more spiritual than Darren for sure over here, or new agey anyways. But so I haven't really thought about it like that.
I'm not an atheist, though.
No.
Well, I think the spiritual part for me is again, I draw a parallel with the analogy I was making about the past life thing. It's like, okay, so I'll look at the near-death experience and I say, okay, is this happening? And gosh, we can get a pretty good handle on it and say, yeah, by all accounts, all reasonable, fair-minded people will say, yes, these people are having a conscious experience when they are dead. When their brain has no electrical activity, which we have no model for, they are having the most hyper-lucid conscious experience of their life, okay? So then that to me is a point for some really deep spiritual questions. Because darn it, that's what these people come back and say. They don't come back and say that the most profound part of it was the tunnel or the this or that. They say, man, it was the love. It was that white light thingy.
The
and
oneness,
I encountered it, and it just blew me away. And suddenly, I was transformed. Well, man, that's where we got to go. We can't shy away from it because it's spiritual. I mean, let's dive right into the middle of that sucker.
It's funny how you get the same feeling from a heroic dose of mushrooms.
Well, that's a really interesting. I mean, you definitely do in some cases, but maybe not. I mean, there you get the parallels with the UFO abduction thing. Hey, is that a shamanic experience? Is that or is that shamanic experience an illusion for something else? I also think it's interesting. What do you guys think of? And I haven't talked about this on the show, I don't think. But what do you think of the whole Terrence McKenna thing and the heroic doses and his brother coming out and kind of outing him and saying, he didn't do no heroic doses for years because he had a few too many heroic doses.
Yeah, we actually had Dennis on. Must have been he was one of our fifth or sixth, I want to say, guests.
Oh, thanks for telling me that. I'm going to dig that up and listen to that. Great.
Yeah, and I don't know. Definitely, it was a whole new look on, because I had experiences with those sort of things in the past when I was kind of doing a lot of partying. I had never really given them much credence as anything other than recreational. And then after kind of stumbling upon Dennis and Terrence and talking to Terrence, to Dennis, sorry, it kind of gave me a newfound respect for maybe some of the things that they have to offer.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I heard exactly what you heard about that. Then I don't think I heard it in that context where Terrence was not supposedly doing heroic doses.
I'm sorry. I mean, that's what I definitely heard that because it made a big stir. Do you remember that, Darren? I mean, part of what he came out with was that. He didn't totally out him like a scam, because Terrence McKenna is awesome. I just love him. I mean, he's just one of the greatest speakers and presenters, ever. But yeah, I guess that was the net of it, was that no, he was not,
eating mushrooms all the time.
Doses.
Yeah, I think
he wasn't doing these huge doses that he was kind of, because he liked to talk and liked to kind of pump it up. It's like, no, man, unless you're doing 7 grams, all this stuff. So it's like, yeah, no, that's check me on that, but I think that's the word.
I know the focus of our conversation was mostly like, I don't think from the way Dennis talked about it, it was like they didn't have a lot of interaction with it so much after La Chorrera. It was kind of just once in a while sort of thing.
We have an episode coming out here called Psilocybus Grimericus, or Grimericus psilocybus, Enter the Mushroom. So we recorded a few hours of Darren and a friend on heroic doses.
Wow, that'll be interesting. Hey, what did you guys think of that research out of the UK with David Nutt, and the fMRI while people were under psilocybin? Do you remember that?
Fascinating, yeah.
Well, was that the depression research?
No, it slowed. Isn't that the stuff that slowed down brain activity a little bit? Opposed to speeding it up, which you would think with hallucinogens, right?
Right. That's my understanding of it.
Yeah.
Is that the expectation was that you'd see this, increased firing, excitation of these brain areas while these people are tripping, and it was the opposite. It was, a dampening down of the brain firing, which kind of fits in with this extended consciousness thing,
meditation.
Yeah, or when you have an NDE, so people have an NDE, they don't have any brain function. Now they're having a hyperlucid experience. And this, I mean, one way to read that is this is kind of a minor version of that. You're on the psilocybin, well, it's just shutting down your brain so that the consciousness can come through. Now, that's my interpretation. I'm not saying that's what the reading saw, but, that's a interesting idea.
Yeah, I mean, it fits in with meditation principles and all that too, right? I mean, you're trying to really increase the gap between thoughts and slow your mind down so you can receive, information or at least be fully present.
Exactly.
It's like if you can slow the process down enough, you can see through the veil a little bit. You get little peeks through the slits.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about, or have you already interviewed Russell Targ at all?
No, I haven't. I'd like to. I can't remember if I've invited him or not, but no, he'd definitely be good. He's great.
Yeah, the fascinating book. And then pardon me?
Have you guys talked to him?
No, not yet. No, hopefully one day. I guess it should probably be sooner than later. There's there's so much going on now. There's so many people to chat with. I do have another kind of question that Red Pill talked about. And it kind of goes into what we were talking about just recently here. So how would we look as a modern society when the non-local nature of consciousness and its survival after death is accepted? Like, how will it differ, do you think? I mean, it's a tough question, but I'm really interested in what you have to say, how that will differ then compared to now.
It's another one of those that gets really deep, really.
That's Red Pill Junkie. That's Red Pill Junkie for you.
Okay, Red Pill Junkie. You gotta answer some of these questions, man. You come on Skeptical Forum and let's hear what you have to say. Your answers to your own questions. On a separate thread where we can all see it and you're exposed.
He will be there.
Because my first thought is to really go kind of spiritual on it and say there's a certain understanding that I'm drawn to that says, kind of there's a little bit more of a purpose for why we're at where we're at, or at least, we're all at different places, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, not to get too new agey or anything. So it's that this push for this big transformation, I mean, maybe it's pretty much the way it's supposed to be, right now, and maybe there isn't this big change, it's just that, hey, we're all working through our stuff, and that means that everyone's at a different stage of working through their stuff, and that's always the way that it is. And again, I hesitate to even go there. I'm not saying this is real, but I told you I want to do this past life regression and between life regression thing to see what it's like and to try and verify it. But one of the things you hear from those people is that you might choose a life developed in these ways, So what does that mean? I mean, if that's true, then it's always supposed to be kind of a mess like this,
Yeah, it's like your soul's agreement to take on this suffering in this lifetime.
Yeah, Mm-hmm.
What do you think of that, Darren?
No comment.
So are you going to? Okay, so what do you think then? What's your prediction, or how do you feel about the next few years? Like, you've been doing this since 2007. Has it been opening up? Is it going to continue opening up? Or you're going to continue on this battle? How do you think it's going to look in the next few years?
I don't have any big ideas or plans for, where it has to go. I'm just kind of following my nose and seeing where, people listeners to Skeptiko have generated ideas for some of the best shows. So that's the nice thing now is there's really kind of a neat community. I've learned so much from the people who listen to the show, either, sending me emails or on the forum, and they've really shaped a lot of my ideas, and they've certainly shaped, the guests I've talked to and stuff like that. So it's great. It's a process just it leads itself, you know.
So it seems weird that this hasn't come up yet, but what are your thoughts on people like Ray Kurzweil and fellas like that and their predictions of the coming singularity and merging with technology? Have you given that much credence, or?
You know, I think that all that stuff, as far as I can tell, and I almost did a show on this, but it's all still based on this mind equal brain stuff. You know, they're still hung up, when you get down to it, with this materialistic paradigm, with this idea that you are, again, you know, to beat the phrase, you're a robot. So, you know, we can get there. So no, I just don't put much stock in it at all until you can tell me how that interfaces with the white thingy, you know, up in the sky that you go to with the near-death experience that they all say is the most profound part of it. You know, until you can talk about that interface, you know, it's teaching dogs algebra. I mean, it's just kind of silly.
So what if it came to the point that you could basically create, if scientists could create some sort of non-biological consciousness, something that was, you know, like almost, I guess, suppose like AI, but an actual consciousness that can, you know, think about its future and its past and all the things that come with being conscious. You know, it can even feel emotion eventually.
What are all the things that go with being conscious, right? So we don't know what those things are, right? So I always think of the interview I had with Buddhist scholar Alan Wallace. And, you know, I mean, he's like a Buddhist monk for like 20 years, you know, the Dalai Lama for the longest time. So you think he's a really calm guy. You get him talking about consciousness, and he gets animated and agitated, you know, and you turn him on to Daniel Dennett, and he just like breathes fire. But he says, I always think of what he said, look, we don't know when consciousness begins. We don't know when it ends. We don't know what's necessary and sufficient to cause it. And you want to start throwing around stuff like, well, when we can make, you know, a computer conscious, it's like, we don't have a clue. I mean, we have to seriously entertain the possibility that consciousness is primary, right? So if consciousness is primary, that means that everything that we think is real, you know, this desk, this microphone, all this stuff, is kind of, it's not primary. It's, you want to call it an illusion or whatever. It's the way we think it is, you know? So our mind is creating all that. That's a reasonable hypothesis. I don't know what the hell it means, but it's reasonable to go down that path. It seems to me much more reasonable to go down that path than it is to, you know, kind of hypothesize, oh my gosh, what if we made this computer, you know, conscious? We don't know what the heck conscious means, what consciousness is. What if consciousness is the whole ball of wax that's creating everything else?
It's the universe trying to observe itself.
Yeah, I don't know what that means, but that's closer to it, isn't it? You know, I hear you.
I think I caught it from an old Bill Hicks segment.
Yeah, Bill Hicks is great. Hicks with you know, what I thought, Bill Hicks, remember his story, back to the psilocybin, you remember his transformational experience, I always remember this, was he has a psilocybin trip with a friend of his, and they both meet in this altered state of consciousness, you know, so they're in this extended state and they meet. Now, what does that tell you about the relationship between your brain and your consciousness? How could you travel to this other realm and then physically meet, exchange information with someone, and then come back in the physical world and kind of share that happened? I mean, that's pretty trippy.
So then, by that standard, I wonder if it'd be possible. So if you created, I guess, the conditions necessary for consciousness, would consciousness just develop itself? Like, could you, like, I don't, like 3D print a fucking brain somehow out of some tissue, and would it, you know, almost like, I guess people call it like antenna or whatever you call it, where
like
you're
a
just
receiver,
a broadcast.
like a receiver, yeah.
You know, maybe I just think there's a million questions along the way there that, you know, would have to be asked and are probably more relevant to the question. We know what they are, but at the end of the day, my sense is there's a bunch of other stuff that would be more relevant to really figuring that out. And again, I feel like we're, you know, the dogs and algebra thing, you know, we're just like these dogs and they're trying to teach us algebra and we're like, I just don't get it, man. Show me where that bone is. That's the only thing I get.
That's funny. I was thinking about have you ever heard of tulpas at all? I was at this Paradigm Symposium and I saw a presentation on tulpas, and
no, I don't
it's talking to you here just makes me think of how, you know, you're talking about creating consciousness and all this, and David Weatherly's coming out with a book. It might be out, but you might find it quite fascinating, and it's about manifestation of beings through thoughts. But there's some actual pretty cool kind of anecdotal stories, and he's got his own story wrapped around some Buddhist monks.
Yeah, that even goes back to monks, right?
Yeah.
Used to be able to make their little tulpa.
Yeah.
Didn't one guy have his little tulpa get out of hand on him and started wrecking up the place?
Yeah. Anyways, there's another little rabbit hole.
I got to check it out. I'll wait for the show. You guys got to do a show on it.
Oh yeah, okay, we will, and we'll forward you that. Yeah, for sure. That's a good way to listen to it on audio while you're doing the dishes or driving to work or whatever.
That's what I like. I'm not about audio, isn't it? I mean, people send books and stuff like that. I mean, I just can't plow through a book. I never have the time, and I don't like to read, really, when it comes down to it. I read so much stuff on the screen, you know?
Yeah.
So
are you going to go to the UFO Congress maybe in Phoenix or in Scottsdale in February, March? That would probably be a good one for you to check out.
I would love to check it out sometime. I'm not going to go this February, and I don't have any plans. I kind of like staying hunkered down here, you know, in Southern California. It's the wonderful thing about podcasting, isn't it? I mean, we're so far away, and yet we're talking and we can share stuff. And there is no substitute for meeting people face to face.
It's all nice and warm where you are.
It is. It was a beautiful day today, guys. Man, I got to tell you, it was really nice at the beach.
It's about minus 25 Celsius here right now.
No way.
Yeah. It's so cold, Darren had to get a pillow for his feet. We are really in the igloo here in Calgary. So I guess we should start wrapping up, Alex. It's just been super fascinating chatting with you, and I appreciate you letting us throw all these crazy thoughts and curveballs at you.
Yeah, before we let you go, can you give our listeners a rundown of where they can track you down?
You bet. It's at Skeptiko, and Graham got it right. Even the spelling of it, you got to stick a K in there. It's SKEPTI.com. Or if you just Google Alex and NDE and any combination in there, I think you'd find it pretty quickly.
And we'll make sure and link to all that in the show notes as well. Are you on the Twitter or the Facebook or anything like that?
Yeah, I'm on all that. You just go to the website, you'll find all that good stuff. I haven't been doing a lot of Twitter, but I want to kind of get into it. I have my reservations about being that, plugged in, but it's cool.
It's a slippery slope.
Yeah, exactly.
Next thing you know, you're getting your consciousness merged with a computer.
You've really tapped into my ultimate fears. Yeah, I was kind of dancing around about spirituality. I'm just afraid of merging with the machine.